You guys were talking about the progressive approach of women and the way that the Bible talks about them. Current day Pope is criticized for being too progressive. What is the history of science, of scholarship, of everything that tends to explore ideas and push things?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel where we break down the most heated debates happening across the internet today. In this one, we are sitting in on a round table where Christian women from completely different sides of the political aisle go head to head on whether liberalism and Christianity can actually coexist. One side argues that Jesus was a progressive who challenged power, while the other insists that liberalism is fundamentally at odds with biblical truth. And what unfolds is a clash of theology, American history, and some receipts that nobody in the room saw coming. Trust me, you do not want to skip out early on this one, because the back half of this conversation flips the entire premise on its head, and somebody actually concedes a point live on camera. Before we jump in, drop a comment and let me know what city or country you are tuning in from today. I genuinely love seeing how far the channel reaches. All right, let's get into it.
And the next prompt is, liberalism and Christianity are at odds. Okay, you can go ahead and start.
Okay, to slightly reference the previous conversation as well. Power corrupts faith institutions. When politics and faith blend and become the same institution, it's bad for the church. It's bad for the people and it's bad for the church, right? So of course your faith will inform your moral compass, which will inform the way that you vote. That's a granted. The problem is that, first of all, if you look at Jesus, what was one of the reasons that he was crucified? The Jews wanted him to be political, and he refused to be.
This is the kind of opening you almost never see in a Christian debate space, and I need you to pay attention to what just happened. The liberal Christian woman walks in and immediately lays down a foundational truth that most American evangelicals have been running away from for decades. She said this: power corrupts faith institutions. When politics and faith blend and become the same institution, it destroys the faith. And let me tell you something. That is not a hot take. That is documented human history. You have to understand why this hits so hard. She is not arguing from some woke modern framework. She is arguing from the actual blueprint of the American founding. The founders, who were Christian men themselves, deliberately kept faith institutions out of the Constitution because they had just escaped a continent that spent centuries soaked in religious wars. And here she is reminding the room of that. Then she drops the historical hammer. She says, look at the darkest times of our church institution, the Dark Ages. The church has all this power, and they are burning women alive as witches because they're midwives, because they have ideas. That is the part that blows my mind, because she is exactly right. The Salem trials, the European witch hunts, historians have documented for decades that a huge percentage of accused witches were healers, midwives, and women who simply held independent knowledge. When the church fused with state power, women paid the price. And then she lands the cleanest line of the entire opening. She says we are not called to subjugate non-Christians to our law. That's a Muslim thing. That is not our thing at all. When Christians start doing this, they're trampling on the name. Okay, this is the section where the entire conversation flips, and I want you to lock in because what happens here is a masterclass in what receipts look like in a debate. The other progressive voice in the room steps in and says this: I have always viewed Jesus as being a progressive because he was trying to make progress during the time. There's nothing about him that was trying to conserve anything at the time. And honestly, when you really sit with that statement, it is undeniable. Jesus elevated women, ate with outcasts, challenged religious authority, and rewrote the social contract of his era. That is not conservatism. That is the definition of progress. But here is where it gets spicy. The conservative side spends a long stretch trying to frame liberalism as the corruption of the church. Abortion, sexuality, the Eve effect. Deny yourself, pick up your cross. And listen, I respect anyone wrestling with their faith, honestly, but the liberal Christian woman is sitting there loading the cannon. And when she fires with history. She says you guys are the newest movement of Christian theology to date, the newest. It started in 1920. It was a schism drawn predominantly by John Kellogg and an oil baron to bring back the fundamentals. Stop. Pause. Because most viewers do not know this, and this is the educational moment of the entire chapter. American fundamentalism as a distinct theological movement traces back to a series of pamphlets called The Fundamentals, published between 1910 and 1915, funded by oil money from Lyman and Milton Stewart. That is documented church history. Fundamentalism is not ancient. It is younger than the light bulb in your kitchen. Then she keeps going. She says in 1960, Billy Graham said, "Let's make this political too. That's why the religion has become so politicized, and it is a bastardization of our religion." And then she absolutely does not stop. She says Christian nationalism is one of the growing fervors behind it. They want to destroy democracy, and they want to repeal the 19th and establish a pope essentially over our country. That is the moment the room goes quiet. Because you cannot fact check her. The dates are real. The names are real. The political shift she's describing is documented in every serious history of American evangelicalism.
And every other sect views your approach to the Bible as heretical.
We're not Christian nationalists.
Right.
Yeah, I said you're fundamentalists.
Let me just make
you're
one
evangelical
quick,
fundamentalists, Protestants.
Let me just make one quick interjection. One thing that is being misconstrued here is the idea that Jesus was progressive. He was not. He was regressive. What he did is he told the Pharisees and the Sadducees, you are not doing what God told you to do. Hold on. God told you to be a light to the world. God told you to be a set-apart people that shows the world my love. What they were doing was becoming extremely separatist, and they were judging people. They were being the opposite of the love of God. So Jesus came to literally correct that back into a culture that literally teaches people about God's love. But he did not ever, not one time say, I am now going to dismiss the laws and dismiss the idea
You're right.
of
He
sin.
said, I fulfill it, and then he updated it.
And he said,
who did he, I might be a Sadducee.
Go and sin
I might
no
be a
more
Sadducee.
to every
You
single
guys
sinner.
are going to be Pharisaic if you're wrong. And who did he say is a snake under his boot that he has stomped down? The Pharisees. I might risk being a Sadducee. And that's something I wrestle with all the time. I understand that I have an unorthodox approach to faith in North America, and I pray about it constantly. But
Now watch what the conservative side tries to do. The man jumps in and says the idea that Jesus was progressive, he was not. He was regressive. And honestly, this is where the whole strategy collapses. Because the liberal Christian woman has been arguing from documented theology and church history, and the counter-argument is essentially a vibe. She comes back immediately with one of the sharpest references of the entire debate. She says, look at how Jesus approached divorce. When you look at the ancient rabbi fighting about divorce, he sided with the liberal progressive side. And that is a real rabbinic distinction. The Hillel and Shammai schools were debating divorce law for generations before Jesus, and his position aligned with the more open, compassion-forward reading. She knows the source material at a level the other side simply was not prepared for. And then comes the moment that should have ended the entire conversation. The conservative woman on camera says this, I actually agree with you. I actually believe that Jesus had many progressive views. He was somebody who elevated women in a time where that wasn't popular, so he was very progressive in many ways. That is a concession. A live on-camera concession. The thesis of the segment was liberalism and Christianity are at odds, and the conservative side just agreed that Jesus himself held progressive views. The premise of the whole prompt just got dismantled by the people defending it, and the liberal Christian woman closes with the kill shot. She says the Amalekites to death. He allowed Solomon to have concubines. I'm sorry if you don't read the Bible and come away with a relativistic approach, meaning the Bible itself contains massive moral shifts across its pages. Anyone claiming a flat, unchanging, literal reading is not actually reading the book. The host cuts the segment right there, and honestly, that cutoff tells you everything. When the receipts are on the table and there is no comeback, you rap. That is exactly what happened. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.